if we trusted our people then, let's trust them now, and let's trust them to kind of define how we want to work differently going forward.
We're actually repurposing our offices at the moment and going through and actually taking down desks and creating collaboration spaces while we're still in lockdown before we reopen, because we know that's how people are going to want to use the offices in the future.
Okay, I think that leads us nicely into the next conversation, which touches on what you were just saying, Rick, about having 1,300 people in 1,300 offices suddenly. I mean, that is what we've all had to face suddenly. But it's not just about the individuals and the people and coming together in their teams, but some of our businesses have relied on physical offices or retail locations. Matt, you've clearly got a big physical footprint in your business, the different areas that you service. How's that going to change as we go back? Because we are going to have to go out there. We can't just all sit at home in our offices forever. There are going to be things that we're going to have to do. How's that going to change, and how are we going to do that balance?
It's again, from a graphic point of view, it's quite interesting because obviously the majority of our business is done outdoors. So the pandemic oddly didn't cause huge amounts of impact. The grass has no awareness there's a global virus spreading everywhere. It keeps growing. So our operating model is really well suited to working in this way. But there's still a head office, and I think in our office, kind of 450 people kind of worked in the office pre last March, and now obviously one or two people go in every now and then, and the kind of we're doing a lot of work now to kind of change the way the office is structured, and it's going to for me it's going to be, and it sort of touches a bit on what Rick was saying on the last point, is it's how we're going to adapt to suit what the individuals want to be able to do, whilst also kind of suiting the need of the business. There is some need to have some face-to-face meetings. Some of our customers want to meet us face-to-face. Some of our work is better done in a face-to-face meeting, and other parts of it work perfectly well remotely. And it's also kind of remembering that everyone's in those 1,300 office locations, they're really, really different. Some people are great and they've got space and they can spread out, and it's cool. Some people are flat sharing, house sharing, and they've got nowhere, and so is everyone else in their house working at home, and so it doesn't work for them at all. So you've got to make sure, as we go forward into the kind of the new normal, that we have that office capacity, but also we're managing it sensibly. So you're thinking about things like, when you're asking people to come in, what can you do about working hours? Maybe in the old days it was 8 till 6 or 9 till 4, whatever it was. Maybe now you can be much more flexible. And it's not about hours in the office, it's about outcomes when you come into the office. Think about when do you need to be there? What are you coming in for? Come in, do what you need to do, go away again. That's okay. And it all comes back to trust. We have, and it's easy to forget, but we all trusted all of our people to go away and do this in an absolutely crazy time when a huge number of mental and physical health issues have been taking place as well, and people got on and got stuff done. I see very few stories of tech-driven businesses failing during the pandemic because their people let them down. I just don't see that happen. So if we trusted our people then, let's trust them now, and let's trust them to kind of define how we want to work differently going forward. Ask them what they want and see how we can deliver it for them in a way that kind of lets our business take all the good things over the last year, and then build on them with some of the, obviously the good stuff that happened historically. It was, good things happened in the past too.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. And having done all of these panel sessions over the pandemic, we've seen a lot of mindset from our teams, but also from leadership in terms of going, we've got this challenge now because of the pandemic. We've got this challenge, but a lot of what you guys are saying is very much like the pandemic has shown us a different way of operating, and now that we've seen that, we don't want to pull back from it. My team runs globally. We support 3 country businesses, and your point about come in the morning, go home in the afternoon or whatever, that's been very useful to my team, because they've come in early in the morning, or they've maybe done an early call to Service Australia from home, possibly in their pajamas, right? And then they've gone into the office for a quick meet up with some of the UK guys, and then left at 3 o'clock in the afternoon to get home in time to do a a 6 or 7 p.m. call with America, you know, and that's worked very flexibly. And people are like, but then I found that people have asked permission to walk their dogs at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, you know, and you really have to just give people license to be empowered to make those decisions. And generally speaking, I think everybody's really starting to get it now, you know, and so that's good.
And it goes back to the digital skills gap piece again at the start, doesn't it? And all the points about who can we recruit and who can we bring on board. Large sections of the kind of the working age population would be closed off in traditional patterns. People with young children, single parents, people with disabilities. There's so many people that perhaps would be closed off from traditional office work that it's there for. And again, if we're going to reach out and bring people in to keep things moving forward and growing our people, it's just a no-brainer to me. This is the way to do it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mohammed, just coming away from the people part of it for a minute, I know that you know you had a lot of paper in your industry, right? And you sort of moved away from some of that. So I suppose you've taken a more digital first approach because you had to, and now you're seeing the benefits of that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's back to my point about nobody was expecting what the pandemic would bring. So there was kind of a status quo in some parts of how we operate that nobody would ever have questioned in the way we operate a business. And the paper side of things is just kind of a tip of the iceberg of the things that you don't necessarily see. Like you talk about change people, but actually how people work. We know people are quite inventive of creating processes and in various ways to collaborate. And in our case, what we found out is we're actually very reliant in this industry on paper. And we had to kind of adapt and find ways to move away from it, which forced us to kind of be actually bold. So these are were really open questions, but there was no incentive at that point to kind of tackle them properly. But with the change of the change of how work is done today, it's kind of in the forefront now. It's like we're looking for efficiencies. We're looking at how we can make, you know, really truly be agile, and those aspects where we still use paper to serve customers or even internal to department. I guess there are a lot of companies that still use kind of bits of paper. So in our case, we really had to stamp out paper and find ways to change the product, change the way we communicate with our customers, and push them to the digital kind of digital first approach. So initially, that supply, I call it a supply chain of paper, because there's Royal Mail. Remember, like, it's not just us. It's like when the pandemic hit, Royal Mail was disrupted. Warehouses or post sorting offices were disrupted. When your business relies on paper, you see the impact very quickly, and you kind of discover, okay, we didn't know we were exposed to that. We were thinking about people being, you know, furloughed or problems with people working from home. It's not about that. It's actually companies who are rely on physical distribution. So for us, it's really about how can you adapt to that and how can you make the system leaner. And at the end of the day, by being bold, we actually create better solution for consumer. We just been lazy a little bit because there was no significant event that prompted us to change those things.
Yeah, I mean, that's true for our whole industry, right? Is that every now and again we should just take a step back and say, what if we could do something from a different approach? And it is a shame that it caused you know, a pandemic to make us think like that. I mean, Rick and Rennie, your businesses, as I think you've already said, were pretty set up for, you know, remote working, digital first working, all of that kind of stuff. Was there anything that surprised you and made you think, okay, well, this is something which we always took for granted was a physical need, a physical requirement, whether that be people, paper, whatever. But then now that you've seen a different approach to it, you're like, yeah, okay, I want to stick with that. And anything particularly grab you there?
Yeah, I mean, I do think our culture is suffering a little bit from the lack of interaction and the lack of ability to collaborate. I mean, there are amazing tools out there right now that allow you to collaborate virtually, but it isn't the same as just being in a room with someone and standing at a whiteboard and creating or sticking a bunch of Post-its on a wall. And I think we're all feeling that. So for some degree, I think that we have lost our creative edge and our ability to innovate by not having any time in person. And that's why I do believe that some of our future is hybrid, as Rick mentioned, the hybrid model. We do see hybrid. We've done some employee surveys about how they intend to use the offices in the future. No one wants to use the office for individual working. Everybody wants to use their office for collaborative working. So we know what the direction of travel is going to be. We're actually repurposing our offices at the moment and going through and actually taking down desks and creating collaboration spaces while we're still in lockdown before we reopen, because we know that's how people are going to want to use the offices in the future. So I think it's just being a step ahead of what you're aware of from that point. Vic?
I think a lot of people are doing that. I think a lot of people are transforming their offices and taking that opportunity, and collaboration is the key word that's coming through on that.
Mm-hmm. I think I agree largely with what Renee's just said. I did another one of these talks about a month ago, and I said, I used the phrase, I think we need to recharge our cultural battery. And you know, we've burnt a huge amount of people's goodwill in working from home and getting them set up. And I think, you know, I echo everything Matt said about, you've got to trust that people are going to do the right thing, because they've just shown how willing they are to do that through a really extraordinary period. But somewhere along the way, you do miss those human interactions. Not for me, it's not the meetings and the post-its, it's the standing by the coffee machine, or the people you run into in the pub after work, or the conversations that are much less formal because you didn't all need to sit down in front of a screen and arrange a time to talk to each other. And it's those little bits that I think, I don't know how you reintroduce humanity. That's what I'm looking for us to find the way to do next.
Yeah, one of the things, and I know this is it's crude and it's hard to plan things, but I started just doing what's called office hours, like going back to old school university style. And Google Cal is quite cool. You can put appointment slots in, and so people can just drop in for 15 minutes and have a chat. And sometimes I even just book it with people and say, I haven't talked to you in a year. How are you doing? I mean, there's a lot of people in our business, so you can't touch everyone, but if many of your key leaders are making that effort, it is forced, don't get me wrong, but in some ways it's better than nothing. It's just really hard.
I do a similar coffee drop-in. I'll say I'm going to be on this Hangout or Zoom for the next hour. Anybody who wants to come and chat, and usually chat rubbish, you know, doesn't have to be work, just chat about anything. If not, I sit there and do emails. But people always turn up, and we always start with football, and then I steer it away from that, and we get onto something more interesting. But you know, it's always a good time. I do find though that it's often the same people who take that time, and you know, you can't subscribe fun or water cooler moments, right? It's very difficult to do that. I found myself, I had an all hands with my department yesterday, and I found myself in that position where I was sort of saying, look, we haven't really spent the social budget very hard, guys. Come on, let's get out there. You know, I took my leadership team on a boat trip on the Broads, the Norfolk Broads last week, and we might have sampled some of our products. I couldn't possibly comment on that, but you know, we just went and had an afternoon just messing about, sort of thing. And you know, I went to my tech all hands yesterday and said, right, we did this. Now you go and do this. Come on, get it. You know, it's almost like you are sort of saying, look, it is important that you spend a bit of time not doing work together. So I think it's kind of challenging for that. We got
one quick thing on that. I think what you've got to be mindful of when you say it's the same people turning up every time is you've got to kind of think about what is on offer, and is it, again, unconsciously excluding people from it, because you know, we've been doing Taskmaster every Friday. We do a Taskmaster at the morning stand-up, so we have a slightly longer one on a Friday. But what I learned from doing that was that when you're doing things, you suddenly realise that certain people, they're really put off by it. They're not uncomfortable, they're culturally uncomfortable with it. So some of the tasks might put them off, especially in anything, you know, if it's touching on the ability for language and things like that. You've got a variety of people, so we kind of keep it really simple. So we've had like best hat, things like, you know, make a friend out of food was the one this morning. So that, I mean, it's literally anybody can do it. It's deliberately, you know, it's not about football's sake, because people don't like football and won't come along and join in, because I'm not interested in football, not coming into that. So it's trying to find things that are culturally inclusive, even when perhaps you don't realise that you're excluding people.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. I mean, we've done all of the music quizzes and all of that kind of stuff, and the same people turn up. The one that was the most popular that we found was one of my people went out and just found a donkey visit, and we ended up doing a Zoom call with a donkey sanctuary. It was just the best. And everybody turned up, and it's the most watched video from all of our fun sessions. So if you want to know where to get hold of a donkey, these are real donkeys in a virtual setting. That's what I'm saying, right? So anyway,